Hello and welcome back to another week of the LA Times College Football Roundtable. I'm Ryan Kartje, the LA Times USC beat writer, joined by Ben Bolch, our UCLA beat writer, who is somewhere between Westwood and Beverly Hills at the moment, in a beautiful autumn behind him.
Yes, I'm actually, I just realized across from Warner Elementary School, for those of you who live on the west side and know that reference point, but a beautiful little area. I thought I would multitask here, take a stop during the walk to talk some UCLA and USC football.
A lot going on with both schools, even though only one of them played this past weekend. Ben, UCLA comes out of this weekend looking pretty good. Another win. That's three in a row, this time over Iowa. What was the key to this victory for UCLA?
I thought UCLA would probably win this game, but if you had told me that they would outrush Iowa and while shutting them down on the ground, I would never have believed it. And that was key because Ethan Garbers did not have his best game. He had a couple of interceptions and lost a fumble into the end zone, which were huge blows for the offense. But hey, their run game made up for it. Huge kudos to TJ Harden and the rest of the running backs. They outgained Iowa on the ground. Really shocking development for what was the worst rushing team in the country coming into the game. And the defense continued to do its thing. Carson Schlesinger, 2 interceptions. Hey Madrano just went in there and ripped the ball away from Iowa's quarterback. I mean, they were more physical than Iowa, and they won their first home game. So it's literally every arrow is trending up for UCLA right now. And I know they're 3.5 point underdogs against Washington on the road this week, but it's like the opposite early in the season. Until you prove otherwise, I'm going to pick UCLA to win. Just like early in the season when they were 1-6, it's like you pick them to lose until you see something that makes you believe otherwise. But the proof's in the pudding. This UCLA team is now playing at a very high level, and they could win out.
Really seems like the defense has just taken a step forward recently, and I guess I wonder what you think is behind that.
Well, I mean, they've got some players. I mean, everybody freaked out when Dantlin went across town and, Laiatu Latu and the Murphy twins went to the NFL, and everybody's like, oh, this defense really depleted. No, they've got some talent, and they've got some great stories like Carson Schlesinger, the walk-on to Butkus Award semifinalist that I've written about. They got some dudes. Jay Toy, as you know, from USC, is a monster up front. On the back end, they've got guys like Brian Addison, the transfer from Oregon, playing at a high level. So you put all that together with Akaika Malloy, who I've said this guy really should be on the list for the Broyles Award that goes to top assistant coach in the country. He's done a masterful job under the radar for UCLA this year. Really phenomenal job of putting this together, and they've just gotten better week after week. I haven't looked at it after last week, but I'm pretty sure their defense is pretty much better than SC's across the board right now with all the metrics.
Yeah, statistically, that certainly seems to be the case. And I think that is fascinating to just see. We thought Danton Lynn's departure would, really have a negative impact on UCLA. And it doesn't seem like it has at all. I do wonder, I would love to get inside Danton Lynn's mind and hear what he thinks for real about that changeover. But I think USC's, certainly been depleted on that side of the ball. I actually think he's done quite well in his first year at USC, given what he has to work with. But certainly doesn't take away what Akaika Malloy has done in this short amount of time he's had this defense.
Yeah, and then switching to offense, Ethan Garbers, I want to say there was a point early in that game where his home and road splits were just unbelievable. I think after he threw his first 2 interceptions, although it was only 2 interceptions against Iowa, it was 8 interceptions and 1 touchdown pass at the Rose Bowl this year, which is just mind-boggling. And that was a big reason they hadn't won there, right? But he pulled it together. Didn't have another turnover through the air after that, and did just enough combined with that run game to get the victory and really keep things going. So, this week UCLA's got Washington on the road. Interesting thing here, UCLA's played its best football on the road, and Washington, I believe, is 5-0 at home. So, two teams kind of in their element, so to speak. Could be a little bit wet and rainy. I looked at the long-term forecast, which is never reliable, but could be a little bit wet and rainy on Friday night at Husky Stadium. which would probably favor the home team a little bit. But it's going to be fascinating. I know Jed Fish always has some trick plays dialed up, and he's got a little bit extra juice to go against the Bruins because some people wanted him instead of Chip Kelly when that move was made, and he was the offensive coordinator for 1 year under Jim Mora. So he's got some history with the Bruins. He'll be motivated, and this will be a really interesting matchup.
Washington definitely a different team at home against USC. They really, I thought, played quite well. Now, UCLA really that momentum it cannot be discounted at this point. And I guess I wonder if you think it's enough to lift this team to bowl eligibility.
Yeah, they got to win 2 out of 3. I think I think if they win this Washington game, there's no stopping them. I do think this Washington game is kind of a coin flip just because I want to give Washington some respect. They are playing at home. Jonah Coleman is a handful, but I think that's actually a good matchup for the UCLA defense that's good against the run game. But I think this is kind of one of those classic coin flip games. So if they can win this one, I think I'm going to definitely favor them to beat. I'm probably going to favor them to beat SC anyway, regardless of the outcome of this game, playing at the Rose Bowl. However, I don't know if I've thrown this stat out there. The home team in the rivalry game has not won at home since 2019, which is kind of unbelievable if you think about it. That was the last time it was the 4x100 game where four different SC receivers had 100 yards receiving.
Yep.
Against UCLA. That was the last time the home team has won this game. So weird things have happened, but I just think that the X factor for me in that game, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but Deshaun Foster, he's going to be motivated to win that game because he played in the rivalry. Lincoln Riley, I mean, he wants to win the game, but is there any extra juice for him? Not in the least as far as I'm concerned. So that's going to be a really fascinating matchup to watch. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We both have games to cover before then, including USC against Nebraska this week. And I'll give you a little insight on Nebraska. I haven't tracked them since the UCLA game, but their freshman quarterback, Dylan Raiola, who got off to a good start this year, really has kind of hit a wall since then. Did not look, he looked like the worst quarterback UCLA's faced all season. Now, a part of that was that UCLA did a good job of pressuring him. But man, I was not impressed at all. In fact, I thought his backup, who came in and almost won the game, did a much better job. But now defensively, I think Nebraska does some things that will cause some problems for USC, but they will be facing a new quarterback. So let's talk about what you expect to see with the change made there.
Yeah, it's going to be a new day for USC's offense. I think Lincoln Riley has tried to suggest that USC is not going to change much of what it does, but I find that to be ridiculous. Obviously, they're going to change what they do because that's the best move in this case. Jaden Mayava is a 6'5", 230-pound dual threat quarterback who can take off and run, can improvise, things that Miller Moss didn't necessarily do. Now, the question is, can Jaden Mayava make decisions in the way that Miller Moss did for a while? Now, those decisions started to go awry towards the end of his time as quarterback, but we don't really know what Jaden's grasp of this offense is and how he'll look. We've seen him in a couple glimpses this season late in games, but that's it. So I'm fascinated to see. I remember watching him during camp, and this is, I wrote a feature about him at the time suggesting that, well, maybe this guy could be the future of USC at quarterback. And at the time, I just remember being taken by how good he looked throwing the ball. Like it was honestly that simple. Like the ball came off of his hand and it was like, whoa, this guy has something that Miller Moss maybe doesn't. Now Miller Moss had 3 years of experience and a lot of time in Lincoln Riley's offense, and that certainly gave him a huge advantage coming in. But now Jaden Mayava sat for these 9 weeks, and I was speaking with his quarterbacks coach specifically about this, and he basically said, the best thing that could have happened to Jaden. He came in very raw. When he started working with him just this past spring, he didn't really understand anything about protections and, stuff that he really needed to know to operate in an offense as complicated and as Lincoln Riley's. So I think, just having that amount of time is going to do him a lot of good. Now, like you mentioned, Nebraska is a tough test to come out of the gate, but you're at home. You've had 2 weeks to prepare. for this. I think they made a good decision by making it clear at the beginning of last week that, this was going to be Jaden's opportunity. So he's had that chance. And I personally, I've been a believer since I watched him in camp. I think he'll, spark this offense in a way that it hasn't and, only make the run game even stronger, which has been certainly the best part of USC's offense this year. So the question is, Dylan Raiola coming back from, an injury, is he fully healthy now? Maybe the health was holding him back before. A lot of questions still to be answered, but Nebraska will have a new offensive coordinator. They're bringing back their quarterback from before. There's a lot of change happening. So I kind of expect some weird things to happen in this game.
Well, how about this for a weird thing? What do you think about USC running the ball more, no matter how well the quarterback change goes, right? I mean, that's been kind of the strength that's been underutilized, right? I mean, do you feel like they need to run the ball more regardless of how the pass game's going?
Definitely. And Woody Marks has proven that he can be the workhorse back that they need. I mean, this is a guy who came in, he's already passed his, season high for his career in carries. There are three, I think he'd passed that before the last game. So with 4 games left in the season. So he hasn't slowed down at all. They've been really impressed just with how much he's been able to hold up. And they also have Quentin Joyner, another really good young emerging running back behind him. So there's a lot of guys to give the ball to in the backfield. The question is, will Lincoln Riley actually give them the ball? And I think that's the best way to integrate a new quarterback, especially one who only has 1 year of starting experience and especially being in a new offense. So this next game is all about Jaden Mayava. And I think he's going to deliver in this situation. The question is, can Lincoln Riley put him in places to succeed in a way that maybe he didn't for Miller Moss?
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think USC is going to win this game and look in a big way and look rejuvenated. I'm going to go with the score of something. I'm going to say USC 35-14. Nebraska does not have a great offense, even when things are going fairly well for them, especially on the road. So I think that's going to be a struggle for them. I think USC is going to have a breakout. And it's going to add, to be honest, it's going to add a lot more interest into the rivalry game. I think especially if UCLA also beats Washington, we'll have kind of, they'll continue their role, and then USC can kind of say, oh, now we've got our guy, and we're going to kind of take off from here. So does he have another year? How many more years of eligibility does Mayava have?
He's a sophomore.
Okay, so he is the
True
future if
sophomore.
things go well, right? So, they could kind of say, hey, we're on our way now. So that would add a really interesting wrinkle to the rivalry game. So that's what I'm going to go out and predict here.
Yeah, I wrote before he was replaced at quarterback that they needed to give him a chance, if only for the fact that he probably would have left had he not gotten a chance. And then you're either guaranteed to stick it out with Miller Moss, or maybe true freshman Julian Lewis, if he keeps his commitment, would have been able to take that. But that's its own struggle with a true freshman quarterback. So I think the safest way to move forward for USC at quarterback is things working out with Jay Mayava, and we'll see how that works out this weekend. One other thing I wanted to mention before we go, USC's president Carol Folt announced her retirement this past week. Obviously, a very quiet week at USC during the bye week. They always make sure there's some news coming out of there. But Carol Folt had a big impact in shaping USC athletics and especially USC football. Obviously, she announced her retirement one day after USC broke ground on its new $200 million football performance center. Certainly good PR timing for her to walk out with a win like that, since she did have a part in kind of shaping campus in that way. But I will be curious to see what her legacy looks like here in a couple years. Obviously, Lincoln Riley is a big part of that, and things haven't exactly looked good on that front for a while. So I think a lot of time still to tell what happens or how we look back on Carol Folt's legacy. One thing I did want to point out, though, which I found fascinating, especially as it relates to football. Carol Folt came in and really did not enjoy the phrase "fight on." That was USC's famous slogan, and had multiple former administrators tell me that she tried to actually see if they could change it to something less contentious. So I just found that an interesting read on your new job as president, coming in and saying something like that. But she certainly spent a lot of money to make USC football, live up to the standard that certainly people think that it should. So, uh, and that's how they have a $10 million coach. But um,
And interesting that she wanted to get rid of fight on at a time when Lincoln Riley's talking about abandoning the Notre Dame rivalry in football. So maybe they don't fight on anymore. I don't know. Maybe it is time for a change. So maybe she was onto something there. But it is interesting. It's going to be both schools with new presidents and chancellors because UCLA's got Dr. Julio Frank coming in, and at some point soon, I'm trying to get an interview with him. It may be very difficult, but he's got a reputation for caring a lot about athletics because he responded to some criticism of the football team when they were down, and obviously made a change there, going from Manny Diaz to Mario Cristobal. It's obviously a big priority for him, and didn't always get the feeling it was under Gene Block. So, it'll be interesting to see if they don't get rolling under Deshaun Foster. Does Dr. Frank intervene, and what happens there? So a lot to watch at both schools here. It should be fascinating.
certainly a time of transition in LA college football. Well, thank you all for joining again. Ben, finish the rest of your walk. Hopefully, you get back to Westwood, and we will see you next week.